Greetings. Welcome to Building the New World. My pleasure to be introducing tonight's session with Yuval Ron, who is an Oscar-winning composer, Grammy nominee, record producer, and peace activist. Known internationally as the Peace Musician, Yuval travels the globe with the interfaith Yuval Ron Ensemble. Among his many honors, Yuval was the featured artist in the Seeds of Compassion concert for the Dalai Lama. He has also collaborated with Sufi leader Pirzia Inayat Khan, who wrote the foreword to his book, Divine Attunement, Music as a Path to Wisdom. Yuval's reflection on music, mysticism, and ancient wisdom bond people of all nationalities and religions and attune us all to the divine. Tonight, Yuval will be speaking about his collaborations with neuroscientists Andrew Newburg and Mark Robert Waldman, authors of How God Changes Your Brain. So Yuval, welcome to Building the New World.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to give this talk this evening at the conference. And since the talk is about sound as the future medicine, and this is something that is we are lucky to see evolving in our world today, but I think that this will be an important part of the world to come, the world that we're trying to build, the future world. I see sound become a very important part of medicine. And the advantage of sound is that it's non-invasive in a way that other medicines where you have to inject a person to give them medicine. With music, sound travels through the space and affect the person through their body, through their brain, through the ears, of course, but also through the bones and the flesh. And there are no side effects. There are no issues like issues with chemotherapy, for example, and other drugs. So sound is one of the safest way to help people and provide medicine through sound. So today's talk is all about that, but I'd like to start with a small, short demonstration about how sound may affect you without touching you through the internet. Let's try a little experiment, a few minutes. I will play a piece of music. I will improvise whatever comes to my mind and just focus on the sound. Just sit there comfortably and just listen to the music and think, what do I feel? What do I see? Any colors, any images, any emotions, any ideas, any sensation that comes to you? Just witness it. Just report to yourself what you're experiencing. It's a form of sound meditation. It's going to be a few minutes long, maybe 6 minutes long. And let's see where it would take us. So if I were in a classroom, as when I teach in colleges and universities and various institutes, if I were in that classroom now, I would ask the audience to comment how they felt through this little journey that I offered. It was about maybe 4 minutes long journey. And some people would raise their hands, and many of them would testify that the first part of the journey was kind of bright. It had optimism, it had roundness, it had light. And then, somewhere in the middle, things start to change. And the emotional weight of the music start to affect the listeners. And some people would say that they sense some darkness and some crying, some longing, some pining, some darkness and pain and crying. Completely different feeling. Now, am I a magician? No, I'm not a magician. I'm a musician. Now, in ancient time, the word musician and magician was one, because the musician was a magician and the magician, the shaman, was also a musician. Music was used in healing and in magic and in shamanism, in tribal society. So there's interesting journey for the word musician and the word magician. But I am certainly not a magician. I'm just a humble musician. But I know how to use different musical modes to affect the mental state and the emotional state and the feeling state of the listener. I know that because my profession is a composer for film. That is what I do for a living. I write music for films and television and video games and online courses and museums and numerous forms of media. And I use music to manipulate the emotions and the thoughts of the audience according to what the director wants me to do. That's what I went to school for. I went to school in Berklee College of Music and I majored in film scoring. And so I studied the psychoacoustic impact of music. Psychoacoustic is a field in science that studies the emotional psychological impact of various musical elements. How does it affect our psychology? And so I just demonstrated to you. I hope you felt that journey, the different feeling and colors and ideas and sense of light and darkness that some of you may have noticed. Hopefully, most of you noticed that. I've done it only with the power of music. And so we know that music can affect our feelings, our emotions, and often it can affect our thoughts. For example, in a movie, you may have a scene where somebody walks into a narrow alley, and if you would just play one note of high violin, just incredible suspense. Everybody in the audience will think that something bad is going to happen to that character that walks down a dark alley at night on the movie screen. Now, if the director would have told me, if I were the composer for that film, and if the director have told me, look, I don't want the audience to think that something bad will happen. Make them think something different than that. Well, I could have done that. I could have written music that has a little xylophone playing as that person walks down the alley. Many people in the audience will not think that something bad is going to happen. And that's how we can affect not just the emotions and feelings, but we can affect the thoughts, the predictions of within the brains of the audience. Incredible power, all from sound. Now, we live in very exciting times now where neuroscience is validating many of the teachings that came from the East, from the Far East and the Near East, from ancient time about the power of sound. And through my work with neuroscientists, Mark Robert Waldman and Newburg, who wrote the book, How God Changes Your Brain, I've learned a lot about what neuroscience says about the impact of sound on the brain. And so I'm happy to report, I'm happy to share with you something that is well known to anybody who wants to research it. There are numerous studies that validate the fact that sound has incredible power on the brain, and there's healing properties to that power that now therapists, music therapists, and scientists can use. And so sound is now traveling from not just being something that is favorable and pleasurable in the concert hall or in the home or in a school show. It's not just going to be used for entertainment, but sound is starting to be used as medicine in hospitals, in centers, in therapy sessions, etc., etc., etc. Very exciting times. Now, let me just give you a few highlights from those studies. There is a study in the making right now of studying how sound can be used in the laboratory to explode and destroy cancer cells, just with sound. Imagine the time where somebody who, God forbid, somebody who is sick with cancer would go in to the doctor's office, lay down on a bed, and put headphones on, or would have speakers playing sound projected towards their body. And at the end of the session, they would go home cancer-free. Incredible, incredible, incredible vision. And it's not just a vision. It is something that is being studied and researched as we speak. Another example, in Japan, in a study in a university in Kyoto, they've managed to use very low sound, very, 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 very low sounds, hardly that human can hear, in order to manipulate and change genes, human genes. Now, I'm not particularly interested or excited about the idea of changing human genes, although there's very, 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 very benevolent side to it, because we could cure some genetic diseases that some people are suffering from if we are able to change genes that are sick and being transferred from generation to generation. Maybe we could solve and elevate suffering in the world with this genes therapy. What I'm excited about is the fact that they use sound, and what an incredible power is for sound. If with sound we could change genetics, the genes itself can change shapes and structure just because of that it was exposed to very, very low frequencies of particular frequencies. So these are some of the forefront, most exciting studies that are done with sound. Now, of course, that sound is being used widely now to help people recover from strokes, from neurological traumas. Sound has been used to help people recover their speech ability in a very, very successful ways. Sound is being used to help Alzheimer, dementia patients. Sound is being used by psychologists and therapists to help people get over anxieties, depression, It even used to boost immunity system, where immunity system is related to issues of stress, because stress hurts the immune system. So if you could elevate stress, the byproduct of it would be that the immune system of the person would function better than under stress. And so these are some of the most exciting aspects of using sound as medicine nowadays. Now, part of my research, and that is where I connected with the neuroscientists that are studying what's happening in the brain right now. My research have been into the sacred music traditions of the Far East and the Near East, meaning India, Israel, the Middle East, Turkey, etc., etc. That's something that I've been studying for over 35 years. It just has been my own quest, my own obsession, my own interests that I focused on. And so through my research into how music was used in the ancient Asian and Near Eastern societies, I found that this usage of sound that now is being used widely in the West was used already in ancient times as medicine. And I'd like to share with you three stories, three legends, three historical accounts of how music was used in the past. Let's begin with India, Mother India. In ancient India, there was a whole system of musical modes called the ragas that were developed in order to connect and harmonize human beings with the natural world. Some of those ragas have been used for medical use, for curing mostly mental conditions, mental diseases. So there's a whole lineage and tradition, well documented, and it's being practiced in India until today in very esoteric quarters that I had the fortune to connect with when I was in India in 2016 to give a lecture at the Quantum Institute in New Delhi. And I shared with them my research, and the local experts from India shared with me their research. And it was a delightful connection, and we keep this connection alive until this very day. They shared with me one of the great, great stories about the extreme example of the power of sound in ancient India. It was about 500 years ago. There was a great emperor named Akbar. And Akbar had a great, great master musician named Tansen. Tansen was the greatest singer of India. He's a legendary singer. People go to his tomb nowadays. People who wish to be a singer, they go on a pilgrimage to get a blessing on his tomb and pray for blessing from this singer that has been dead for about 500 years. But he's still inspiring and affecting people in India nowadays. He was an incredible singer, the master singer and a composer. He composed music. And one day, one of the advisors of the emperor Akbar, who was Akbar, the emperor, was very fond of his court master musician Tansen, but the advisor of Emperor Akbar didn't like that Akbar was so attached to this Tansen. There was some jealousy involved, and the advisor one day whispered in the ear of Akbar, you know, if you really, really want to see if Tansen is really the greatest singer of all times, ask him to play, to sing for you this very rare, extremely rare raga, this musical mode that nobody dare to even sing, and nobody even know how to sing it. It's called the Deepak Raga. The Deepak Raga. Let's see if Tansen can do the Deepak Raga. Now Akbar, who was a music student and a music lover and could play various different musical modes, he was very curious emperor, and he got intrigued what is that Deepak Raga? And so he called Tansen in front of him and he said, Tansen, would you please play for me the Deepak Raga? And I will set up a concert tomorrow night in the courtyard outside, and I would like you to perform that raga for me. And when Tansen heard the Deepak Raga, the name Deepak Raga, he became pale. Because what Tansen knew, the Deepak Raga was used very rarely, and it was used to create fire. It's a raga that if the performer would do it right, and only few masters could do it right, but if they would, they themselves, their body would get so hot that everything around them will get hot, and something would catch fire. Sometimes even the person itself, the master musician, would catch fire. It would get so hot. There could be any spark in the space would start a fire. And Tansen knew that he may lose his life in this effort. Legends told that the stories of all kinds of masters before Tansen who died trying to sing the Deepak Raga, and they got burned. But the emperor asked, and Tansen had to do whatever the Akbar, the emperor, asked him. And so Tansen went home and thought what to do, how to save his life from this horrible Deepak Raga challenge. And suddenly he had an idea. He called his daughter, who was a master singer. She was one of his favorite students, and he called one of her girlfriends, who was the best singer as well. They were the two best singers, the two best students of Tansen. And he told them, tomorrow night, I want you to hide under the staircases and prepare to sing the rain raga. It's a different raga from the Deepak Raga. The Deepak Raga is the raga that creates fire. There's another raga that brings rain. And it has to do with the temperature and the moisture in the air that is being affected by the singing, by the intense singing of a performer, a master performer. And that moisture in the air causes some moisture and even drizzle and even a strong rain if the conditions allow. And so he said to them, I'm going to give you a cue. In the courtyard, there are lamps, oil lamps, and I know the emperor will leave them unlit. And they will wait to see if I could lit those lamps on the court's fences, walls. As soon as you see the lamps catch fire, start singing the rain raga. And that may save my life. Can you imagine the daughter of Tansen, how dramatic this was for her to hear, and how emotional she must have been when her father, her great master teacher, told her that. In any case, the next evening, all the dignitaries and all the most important noble people of the court of the Emperor of India came to this private concert, and everybody knew that this is a challenge, and it has to do with the fire raga, and everybody waited to see what's going to happen. There were oil lamps on the walls around, unlit. Tansen sat on the stage and began singing. He sang the Deepak Raga. And the more he sang, the more sweaty he became. He just became so hot. And the air around him became so hot. People in the audience started sweating. The leaves on the trees, the more he sang, after more and more singing. And just that you know, singing raga in India, that's something that it's not a 5-minute song. That's something that takes 45 minutes, 90 minutes. Between 45 and 90 minutes. That's one song in a concert. It's a completely different culture than our Western culture. People sit quietly and enjoy one song that lasts 45 minutes or 90 minutes. And it's every note is interesting for them. Every note is emotional for them. So the people are sitting, the air becomes hotter and hotter, and suddenly Tansen looked up and saw the trees in the courtyard. The leaves of the trees became dry from the heat in the air. And he kept singing and kept singing, and he started to be drowsy, and he started to about to lose it, and suddenly the fire, some spark, hit the lamp posts, the lamps with the oil, and the lamps lit up. And right at that moment, two female singers, hidden behind the staircases, start singing with all their heart and all their might the raga, the musical mode for bringing rain. And it immediately cooled the air, and Tansen fell unconscious on the stage. He stopped singing. He was completely knocked unconscious. And rain started. And the rain cooled the air. Tansen was taken to the hospital. He almost died. He was saved, and the Emperor Akbar realized that he almost killed his own greatest treasure. And he was very, very regretful. He punished his advisor that suggested that challenge, and he gave many treasures to Tansen, who became even more rich and more fortunate. So this is just one example from how the power of sound is so ingrained in the culture and the life in India. Let's move a little closer to us. We move from the Far East to the Near East, to the ancient state of Israel, the ancient biblical state of Israel. You know, there was the first king of Israel, and this is a story that I shared in my book Divine Attunement, that was published by the Oracle Institute Press. There was the first king of the ancient nation of Israel was called Saul, King Saul. Not many people know about him. He was a young man. He ruled a very short time, but he was the very first king. Way after Moses, way after the prophets, but some of the prophets. But he happened to have mental illness. He had manic depression. He was a horrible king. He didn't know what to do. He was a young man. He was not qualified, but he was the king. I tell the story in my book why he was chosen to be a king, and it's a whole very interesting story that you should look up. Why King Saul became the first king of Israel. But the doctors tried all the medicine. The advisors tried all the advices. Nothing worked. Nothing. The king was all the time depressed. He couldn't function. Manic depression. Horrible situation for the first king of Israel. And so one advisor said, you know what? There's a shepherd up in the mountains playing really beautiful music, a very talented shepherd, a young boy. Let's go and ask the father of the boy if we could bring him, if we could take the boy to the court to play this music. Maybe music will make the king feel better. Let's try. Okay, no medicine worked, no doctors can help. Let's try this young shepherd boy. Guess who was this shepherd boy? He was a boy named David. David. He came with his flute, with his little harp. He was a master musician, this little David. And little David played music. He was a teenager, a young boy, played music for the king. And it was amazing. Whatever David played really cured the king from manic depression. He was completely cured. But it is said in the Hebrew Bible, as long as David played the music, the king was healed. But if David would stop playing the music, if there was one day without music, the king would lapse back to his mental condition of depression. And so an offer was made for little David to move in and live in the court. He became the court music therapist. Nobody tells us that, but it's pretty obvious if you read the Hebrew Bible that the first job, actually the second job of little David, was a music therapist. First, he was a shepherd. Two, he was a music therapist. He is the first music therapist that is mentioned in the ancient scriptures. And because he was around the king, working for the king, he ended up volunteering to go and fight Goliath. And then because he won against Goliath, he became the first king. He became the second king of the nation of Israel and became a very, very important king, King David, as maybe perhaps the most important figure in the most important king in the ancient history of the nation of Israel and the world. So he wasn't just a king and a music therapist, he was a master composer. He composed all the Psalms. He was a poet, he was a master dancer. He was a military leader. Amazing man. And so this is one of the earliest testimonies, historical oral tradition from ancient biblical Israel about how music was used as medicine. And last, let me share with you the last anecdote, which is it's a historical information from closer time to us, about 500 years ago. 500 years ago, the Ottoman Turkish Empire was formed. They advanced from Turkey and conquered all of the Middle East, North of Africa, and East Europe. They managed to get all the way into Europe, all the way to Vienna in Austria. Big empire, powerful empire, the Ottoman Empire. And in the Ottoman Empire, there were mental hospitals. And these mental hospitals functioned for the last 500 years, until 1917. And in these mental hospitals, there were doctors who prescribe particular musical modes that would be played for a certain time, for a particular length of time, for certain patients based on their conditions. And there were musicians, master musicians employed in the hospital who would receive the prescription from the doctor, look at the prescription and say, that mode, yes, I'll play that mode. And they would play their flute or play their lute, and they would cure patients from mental illnesses. And this was an incredible system of using music to cure mental illness. And this system worked for hundreds of years in Ottoman Turkey until 1917. In 1917, the Ottoman Empire collapsed. The winning countries, France and England, required that the losers, Turkey, would have a secular republic. And Turkey responded and set up a secular republic where there's separation between state and religion. And because many of the musicians were Sufi spiritual musicians that were associated with a religion, Islam, all these musicians were kicked out of the hospitals. They had to leave. The whole system collapsed because you couldn't have state and religion, church and state in the same building in a mental hospital. And all the mental hospitals were in our state hospitals. So the music was kicked out because of that. Interestingly enough, in recent years, I came across a wonderful story on CNN, and I actually saw it with my own eyes. Two doctors in a hospital nowadays in Turkey, two surgeons cutting a patient, opening the patient up, doing the surgery, closing the patient, sending the patient to the recovery room. Now, in a normal hospital anywhere in the world, these two surgeons, after they worked so hard, they would go home and rest, or they would go to the office to rest, they would go somewhere. These two doctors went to the recovery room, left their knives, surgery knives, in the surgery room, and picked up a Sufi bamboo flute and began playing music in the recovery room. And in the interview, it turned out that those doctors, those scientists, shared with a reporter of CNN that they found that the patients recover better with less drugs and less time in the hospital if they provide them this music in the recovery room. And guess what? As a side note, it was mentioned, oh, I don't remember if it was mentioned in the story, but through my research, I found out that these two doctors have a connection to the Sufi orders in Turkey that kept this knowledge and this tradition under the ground, under the nose of the state. And they're doing it now, these two doctors doing it informally without really, it's not an official part of the um, therapies, but it is being used as therapy and it's effective. So this is a wonderful turn of events, how music is coming back to recovery room, to treatment rooms, even in Turkey and all over the world. There's more and more and more sound and music used in hospitals and clinics to help people recover and heal. And so we are living in exciting times. This is a beginning of a revolution. It's a beginning of changing the way we use medicine and moving from drugs that have a lot of side effects, chemical drugs, to energy medicine. Music is part of energy medicine. It's energetic. It works through a wave, through a vibration. Music has it's basically a set of vibrations. The vibrations affect the patient. I'd like to conclude mentioning a few more of my collaborators in this field, in this exciting field. And one of them is Dr. Richard Gold, who started a record label called Metta Mindfulness Music. Metta with Metta. Metta in Sanskrit means loving kindness. So Metta Mindfulness Music.com. It's a label that provides music for healing, and that's I worked for the last several years with Dr. Gold creating healing music and musical tracks that help people heal and get better, get over sleep issues, sleep deprivations, depression, digestion issues. Communication issues. There's a whole list of things that the music managed to help people, including learning for tests, improving focus, improving concentration, improving ability to meditate, reducing anxiety, reducing depression. So this is our contemporary continuation of the work that King David have been doing in ancient Israel more than 2,000 years ago. Another collaborator of mine, her name is Gail Lynn, and she's an inventor of something called the harmonic egg. It's an amazing thing. She built an egg. It's an isolation chamber. It looks like an egg. You go in, there's chair, reclining chair, you sit in there, and there's music playing. And they close the door and you sit there, you recline, and you are completely disconnected from the rest of the world. And you're just floating in music. And the way the music goes in this egg that she built, And all this structure is built according to golden ratios and sacred geometry. You know, there's a reason for every little bit. The materials, the configuration, the ratios of the, the, um, the construction, everything was done mindfully and on purpose. Uh, the impact of the music in this isolation chamber called harmonic egg is extraordinary. It's really enveloping you and penetrating you through from all directions. It's better than surround sound in a movie theater, way better. It's really a sound bath, and it's coming at you from all direction, and you just float in it, and it has incredible healing powers. And so this inventor, Gail Lynn, is now, she opened now centers all over the country and in the world. It's going now to South America and to Europe. But I think there's about 20 centers in America now where people go to heal themselves from various different conditions in that isolation chamber with particular music that is being used. Um, I'd like to mention an old collaborator of mine named Robert Monroe, who developed the binaural beats, the brain entrainment. It's called the hemisync sound. And I worked with him 30 years ago. And he was a researcher that researched the impact of music on the brain. And this is a whole other method called binaural beats that can entrain the brain to change patterns of thinking and operation. So it could slow down your brain. It could vibrate your brain, resonate your brain to go to a frequency that is productive for better sleep or better meditation or better work or better focus, etc., etc., etc. So it is really exciting times because now we not only have the mystics and the old masters of the ancient world in the Far East and the Near East teaching us, okay, use this sound for that, use this mode for that, use this raga or this musical mode. We have neuroscientists and scientists studying all those impacts and validating them and advising us about what we're doing. What is the impact that the sound have on human beings? It's a wonderful time. If I just look at that aspect of our current world and our current development, I'm very optimistic. I wish everything else in our world would have this marriage of art and science and working towards benevolent well-being and growth and helping people. And so that is my sharing. If you'd like more information about it, there is more information in my book, Divine Attunement. It's published by Oracle Institute Press. You can go to my website, send me an email, send me a question anytime. You can look up what I do, how I use music for various media and for healing. My website is yuvalronmusic.com. You can also look at metamindfulnessmusic.com. You can research the net, look at neurological studies of the impact of sound on the brain. And please keep in touch. I would love to hear from you and assist you and share with you any information that I have. And let's see if there are any questions from listeners or viewers right now. I'll be happy to entertain it.
And you have to unmute, Yuval.
Okay. I see a question from Oracle Institute about South American shamans who use a special tea or special mushroom for the shamans. Um, the use of mushrooms and teas and substance, all kinds of natural substance and chemical substance can affect your vision. It can affect your inspiration, but I don't think that it's something that is necessary in order to use sound for medicine. You don't have to get into altered state with um, different substances in order to use sound for medicine. There's another question. Yes, there's a question about the vanishing modes, as I call them, and it's something that I refer to in a chapter called Vanishing Modes in my book Divine Attunement. The vanishing modes is another example of us losing something that our ancestors had. We used to have more musical modes in the West, in Europe, 1,000 years ago. We know that because we know that in 7th century, the Greek modes, the church modes in Europe that came from the Greeks were used, and there were at least 7 different musical modes. Now in the West, we have only 2, major and minor, which is incredible poverty from a musical mode spectrum point of view. In India and in Israel and in China and in Persia and Iran, there are countless musical modes. Each one is being used, has a different emotional and mental effect, and they still use until today. So we lost in the West. We lost some of the musical modes. We lost some of the chord tones, the notes in between the black and white notes of the piano, and we lost with the the age of enlightenment and the whole taking over of the church in Europe, taking over the indigenous cultures and crushing all the indigenous cultures because the church in Europe considered all those cultures pagan and everything had to be erased. A lot of the information of music as medicine was lost in Europe. And then science developed in Europe, and that affected the rest of the world that followed the lead of Europe. And shamans and sound therapists in the ancient world over time became more and more and more marginalized. So now we are in a very exciting time that Western science is starting to embrace some of the methods that were used by the shamans and by the sound doctors of the past. Let me see if there's any other comments. There is no volume setting for my mic on the studio, so
Hey, Yuval, I can.
Yeah. If you'd like to turn the volume higher, if some people would like to hear my voice louder, if you could do that, that would be wonderful. There's a question here: how can I find a doctor who knows musical protocols? Can the right type of music be found online so we can heal ourselves at home? There are music therapists all over the country. I know of some in Boulder, in Denver, some in Los Angeles, some in Florida. If you want to contact me, I can try to put you in touch with some. You can look them up. It's best to find somebody and to have the practice in session. Some people use voice, some people use singing bowls, Tibetan bowls. Different therapists use different devices. If you want something like a music therapist, there are music therapists, clinics of music therapists. Often they work in hospitals. It depends what is that you need. So it's a very general question that you're asking me that is a bit hard to answer in detail. Let me see, there's another question. When the Titanic was singing, the musician supposedly played to ease panic. What's the best music for anxiety, and what is the best music to help induce vision and bliss experience? Okay, music that ease anxiety typically have to have very slow pulsation. It has to be warm. It has to have some light in it, not dark. Music, there's a spectrum of lightness and darkness in music. And musical modes, the different musical modes are sitting on a spectrum of light, from light musical mode to the darkest and all the shades in between. You can look up, as I mentioned, metamindfulnessmusic.com and look for a track. It's called Relieve the Blues. There's also Relieve Stress, Stressless. You can look it up and find the right music for relieving anxiety. The other question, the other part of the question was about music that can increase intuition. Was that the question? Intuition or vision? There is a track called Third Eye Chakra on Metamindfulness Music. Third Eye Chakra has to do with intuition. There's several different tracks that would affect that. Also, Crown Chakra music would affect vision and connection to the thing that is beyond us, that is beyond human. And so Crown Chakra tracks, Third Eye tracks would help with cultivating vision. This is a little bit shallow and on the surface. It's a lot more complicated with that. There's also elements of fire that is required and heart chakra that is required to cultivate mind vision. And so there's no just one track that is a magic bullet. There's a whole practice that could cultivate vision and intuition. Some of it is binaural sound. Right now I'm working on a track with brain entrainment and binaural beats that affect the brain to cultivate more mind vision. And that's going to be available in a few weeks. Let me see, there's another question here. Are sound baths with crystal balls healing? Crystal balls are a very powerful instrument. These are balls made from crystals. It's a shape of a ball, and a musician uses a mallet or stick to rub them and create a very long and vibrating, pulsating sound. They've been shown to work in various different therapies to ease pain, again, to lower depression and anxiety. It's a wonderful meditative form of sound. They're called singing bowls, Tibetan bowls, crystal bowls. You probably could find somebody who is a specialist in that. I know several people in California who specialize in it. There's one person in Florida that I know that is a practitioner. It's a great method. Robert Monroe and Hemisync. There's a question here about Monroe Institute is in Virginia and close to Oracle campus. I'm wondering if they ever travel with this technology, or do you have to go there? The Monroe Institute have courses online that you can take. They have many products that people all over the world over the last 35 years have been using. I mean, there's people in Germany and Switzerland and Holland and England, all over Europe, that have been using the products of the Monroe Institute. And you can look it up. You can get music. You can do an online course, and you can go. When the pandemic is over, you could go to Virginia to the institute and study there. Um, but it's not limited to being in Virginia. You can get all the products online nowadays. There's a question here. What is the healing difference between a song done by a female singer versus male voice? Um, that's an interesting question. Um, this really depends on the music and depends on the patient. There's no gender bias in healing music. You can have a male singer that would provide something that is soothing and helpful for you, and you could have a female singer providing sound that is helpful for you. So the range of female voices and male voices tend to be different, although you can find a female singer who may have a low voice, and you may have a male singer that have a high voice. And so even within those categories, it's not unified. What is important for healing? Let me share with you this insight. What is important in healing is not what kind of music it is, or if it's a female singer or a male singer or whatever. What was found in a study is that music therapists in that study provided music for patients who recovered from stroke. Okay, and the music therapist chose the music. And there was an improvement in the recovery of those patients that received the music that the music therapist chose versus the group of patients that received no music. But they had a third group, and the third group in that study, they let the patient choose the music that they wish to listen to. And guess what? That group had even higher success rates as far as using less painkillers and spending less time in the hospital after recovery, during the recovery from stroke. These patients had more success than the patients that had the music therapy choose the music for them. And what we learned from this is that you are your own healer. You are the only one who really know what you need. And if you choose what music pleases you, that music will have greater chance to help you. So it has, especially for relaxation and for healing, you have to find the music that pleases and soothes you. And that music may be irritating for another person. But for you, that music is the medicine because it relaxes your muscles, it lowers your pulse, it gives you a break, it gives you a chance to relax and to maximize your healing. So you are the one who knows what you need. There's another question here. Are any studies being done on how music affects children? Yeah, there are numerous studies about how music affects children, and it's a as you can imagine, it's a very powerful impact on children. It's wonderful to use music with children. There are countless studies. You just need to look up what you're interested in. If you're interested on how music affects children who had brain trauma to recover their verbal skills, you can find a study about how music affected children in that sense. You can find studies about how music help kids have less nightmare and have better sleep. There are numerous studies out there about that. There's another question here. Would you please play your oud again? Yes, I'll be happy to. Okay.
Yuval, thank you so much. Let me give you a chance. Can you adjust your mic so you can come on voice? Because we know there's an echo when you're on the music mode, because we just want you to say a couple of closing words. I just appreciate you coming on and really sharing the importance of this topic, because as we all know, the world's under a lot of stress, and the power of music is really something. So it feels like a very sacred presentation, and we just want to extend our really deep gratitude to you for it.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad to be with you guys. I hope you could hear me. I have another question on screen. Have you ever healed with music in peacemaking scenario? Yes. I wrote a couple of chapters in my book about how music was used in peacemaking, and one chapter is called "Can a Song Heal?" And there's a whole story how a song that we played in a certain place in Israel, in a gathering of Palestinians and Israelis in one village, how the music ended up healing one of the mothers who lost her daughter 3 years before. And for 3 years, that mother stopped dancing. And that was a professional dancer who just couldn't dance anymore because of the tragic loss of her daughter. And something happened during that song that we did that evening, and she went back to dance. She went back dancing that moment. And her husband came to me after the concert to tell me that, because I didn't know the background story. But this is one of the chapters in my book. If you'd like to know more, just send me an email, yuval@yuvalronmusic.com. Look up in the book and other interviews that I've given, and you could find out more and more stories.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Yuval. Continue that sacred work. And we're just so grateful to have you here and really deeply appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen. Be well, everybody.
All right. Thank you. And then just to let everyone know, we'll be on again at 7 Eastern tonight with Alex and Allison Gray. So we look forward to seeing everyone then. Thanks, and be well until then.